Have you ever asked yourself, if I could go back to being 70, what would I do differently? I've asked myself that question many times in recent years. Not because I'm full of regrets, but because the longer I live, the more I realize there are things that had I known them just 5 or 10 years earlier, my old age could have been so different. Less pain, less worry, less dependence on my children. But no one told me. Back when I was 70, I was still healthy. I drove myself to the market, cooked every meal, climbed stairs with ease. I thought I was still young for my age. And maybe that's why I ignored some important things. I brushed off my body's warnings. I neglected building a social circle. I overlooked the quiet signs of loneliness creeping in. And then, old age came. Without warning, without grace. So today, if you're in your 60s, 65, or just turning 70, I ask you to take a few minutes to listen to these 7 things I wish I had known earlier. Things that may seem small, but could completely change the way you experience the years ahead. Things that could help you age with more independence, more lightness, and fewer regrets. And if you're watching this video and have ever wondered, am I truly preparing myself for old age? I invite you to leave the word "ready" in the comments. Let it be a reminder to yourself that it's never too late to begin again and to live better starting today. Back when I was 70, I didn't pay much attention to leg exercises or daily walks. I thought my legs were still strong. I could climb stairs, go to the market, carry bags. So what was there to worry about? I was complacent. And I was wrong. Just a few years later, I began to slow down. My knees ached when I stood up. Climbing hills left me breathless. But the most frightening part wasn't the pain. It was the feeling of losing my freedom. When you can't step outside for a walk on your own, when you need help getting into a car, when you hesitate at the sight of stairs. That's when you realize keeping your legs strong isn't about fitness. It's about preserving your dignity. It's about holding on to your independence. I once met an old friend, Nancy, 5 years older than me, and still briskly walking her dog every morning. I asked her what her secret was, and she smiled. I treat my legs like lifelong companions. I talk to them, I care for them every day. She wasn't speaking metaphorically. She actually spent 15 minutes each morning, gently stretching, massaging her knees and ankles, and eating foods that supported circulation. I followed her lead, and after a few weeks, I already felt steadier on my feet. If only I had known earlier, just 10 to 15 minutes a day, stretching your legs, practicing sit-to-stand exercises, or taking a light walk around the house, could have helped me avoid relying on a cane, or those days I stayed home out of fear of falling. Our legs are the foundation of freedom, and when we let them weaken without care, we are quietly giving away our ability to live on our own terms. If you're still listening, ask yourself, how strong are your legs today? Are you truly taking care of them? And if this made you pause and reflect, don't hesitate to share in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to begin taking their next step forward, stronger and more mindful. I used to think growing old meant peace and quiet, but after turning 75, I realized there's a kind of quiet that's no longer beautiful. It's the kind that stretches for days without anyone saying your name, no one asking how you feel today, no one to tell stories to, not even something as small as what you had for lunch. And that's when I began to understand, loneliness doesn't come from the absence of people, it comes from the absence of being truly heard. It eats away at your spirit, making the days feel longer and the nights colder, even when the weather is warm. I remember one autumn afternoon, I was sitting in the park and happened to meet Mr. Louis, an 83-year-old widower living alone. We talked for nearly an hour about the simplest things: his dog, the maple tree outside his house, the pie he bakes every Saturday. As we parted ways, he gently held my hand and said, "Thank you for listening." I haven't spoken to anyone in 3 days. I was speechless. Loneliness is a quiet killer. It doesn't scream, it doesn't leave a trail of tears, but it slowly chills the heart. It makes the elderly lose their appetite, lose the will to go outside, and eventually lose the desire to keep living longer. If I had known earlier that connection was the best medicine to prevent emotional decline, maybe I would have opened my heart sooner. I would have picked up the phone and called an old friend. I would have joined a book club, or at the very least, walked to the park, and said hello to a stranger. Because sometimes, a single conversation, a kind pair of eyes that truly listen, that's all it takes to warm an aging heart again. If you're still watching this, ask yourself, have you been quiet for too long? Share with me in the comments, who do you miss most? Is there someone you can call today? Maybe through these little exchanges we'll feel a little less alone. For the longest time, I believed that in order to live a long and healthy life after 70, I needed lots of supplements. Omega-3 capsules, multivitamins, and even those expensive ginseng boxes my children sent me each year. My medicine cabinet was full. Yet, strangely, my heart felt empty. I remember one morning, while preparing my usual glass of calcium-enriched milk, I suddenly paused and looked out the window. The sky was clear, birds were singing, sunlight poured through the leaves, and in that moment I realized it had been a very long time since I felt truly joyful. Not because I lacked nutrients or pills, but because I lacked laughter, purpose, and those moments that made my heart feel alive. I once met Linda, 76 years old, at a painting class for seniors. She didn't take any supplements, yet she was energetic, cheerful, steady-handed, and her eyes sparkled. When I asked her for her secret, she smiled and said, "I paint every day. When I hold a brush, I forget that I'm old." That's when it hit me. Happiness is the most powerful supplement for older adults. You can't buy it at the pharmacy, you don't need a prescription, but it heals the fatigue in both your soul and your body. If I had realized this earlier, I might have spent less money on pills I didn't need, and more time on things that made my heart come alive again. Things like gardening, cooking childhood recipes, or writing down the memories I've carried through the years. Dear friend, if you're still watching, I invite you to pause for just a few seconds and ask yourself, what truly brings me joy? Not what pleases others, but what makes you feel alive. Share your answer in the comments below, because what you write might just inspire another older soul out there who's still searching for a reason to smile again. There was a time when I hated being called old. I hated the way people offered to help me cross the street. I even hated how my children insisted I take the elevator instead of the stairs, like I used to. I still felt agile, still capable, and maybe because I thought that way, I ended up falling, both literally and figuratively. One afternoon, I was rushing to the market to pick up a few things for dinner with my grandchild. It had just started to rain, the yard was a bit slippery. I walked faster than usual, worried the market would close early. One hurried step and I slipped. I broke my hip. That fall didn't just keep me in bed for over 3 months, it shattered my trust in my own body. That's when I truly understood. After 70, the cost of one rushed step isn't just a scrape or a bruise, it could be your independence. A single fall can leave you unable to walk the same, unable to care for yourself, and from there your body and spirit begin to decline. I once met Mr. Harold, 81 years old, at a senior community gathering. He told me that after his best friend passed away from slipping in the bathroom, he adopted a new life motto: slow down to live longer. From the moment he gets out of bed, walks down the stairs, or rises after a meal, he does everything with calmness, awareness, and caution. If only I had known sooner, I would have installed grab bars in the bathroom. I would have worn non-slip shoes at home. I would have listened to my body when it was tired, instead of trying to prove I was still as quick and capable as before. If you're watching this video, let me ask you honestly, when was the last time you rushed, and for what? Because after one fall, you might lose more than your balance, you might lose a part of yourself. If you've experienced something similar, please share it in the comments. Your story might be the reminder that saves someone else in this community. I used to believe that being kind was simply part of being human. It's what my parents taught me from a young age, and truly I lived my whole life that way. Holding doors for strangers, sharing food, helping neighbors, and never saying no when someone needed to borrow money. I believed in the goodness of people. I believed that if I treated others well, they'd do the same in return. But after turning 70, I learned that kindness doesn't always have clear boundaries, and sometimes it can be the first crack that opens the door to pain, especially when you're older, slower, and more dependent on the relationships around you. I still remember the first time I was taken advantage of. A former student of my husband's, someone we had known, visited my home, spoke warmly, and then gently asked to borrow a little money, just to get through the week. Without hesitation, I gave him some savings. He never came back. That wasn't the only time. A few other moments, I was approached by well-dressed young people claiming to be part of charity organizations. They came to my door offering free gifts for seniors, but slowly coaxed me into buying products with unclear origins. I didn't want to worry my children, so I stayed silent. Later, I found out several neighbors had gone through the same thing. We were all victims of trust. I'm not saying we should close ourselves off or become suspicious of everyone, but at a certain age, kindness must be paired with caution. I've learned to say no. I've learned not to open the door when I'm home alone. I've learned to keep my banking passwords private and never hand over my card for someone to help me make a payment. Most importantly, I've learned that not everyone who calls me ma'am or grandpa truly cares. If you're watching this, I invite you to share in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where your kindness was taken advantage of? Share your story, not to blame, but to warn and protect one another. Because at this stage of life, we no longer need to please everyone, we just need to live in peace and learn how to protect ourselves. I used to believe that love, the bond between parents and children, was the most sacred thing in life. I truly believed that if I loved my children enough, cared for them, raised them well, then when I grew old and weak, they would naturally stay by my side and care for me in return, like a fair circle of life. But then I learned, some "I love you, Mom" or "I love you, Dad" are warm, yes, but not always strong enough to keep someone by your side when you need them most. I don't blame my children. They're busy with families of their own, careers and pressures I don't fully understand, but I still remember the day I went to the hospital. Sitting alone in the waiting room, I looked around and saw so many elderly people with their children beside them. I smiled to myself and thought, maybe my child is stuck in traffic, but inside, I felt incredibly alone. Family ties, if not nurtured with time and presence, fade like old photographs. And so I realized, to avoid feeling heartbroken in old age, I had to learn independence in both my emotions and daily life. I couldn't place all my hopes on the idea that someone will stay with me until the end. Because the truth is, everyone has their own life. And sometimes, the elderly are gently, quietly set aside in ways that hurt more than words can explain. I began making my own financial plans. I prepared simple things like my health insurance, doctor's contact, and the nearest hospital address. I learned to care for both my physical and emotional health. I joined a group of senior friends, not so I had to wait for my children's phone call to feel happy. And most of all, I stopped blaming my kids when they were busy, because I had finally learned to love myself the way I once loved them. If you're still listening to me now, have you ever felt forgotten in your own home? If this resonates with you, type, "I've felt that" in the comments below. You are not alone, and by speaking up, we allow ourselves to begin healing. Because true connection doesn't live in promises, it lives in how we honor our own worth, even when no one else is watching. Have you ever thought that once you grow old, all the doors start to close? The doors to dreams, to freedom, to love, to longing? I used to think so. But then, growing older gave me a gift I had never truly grasped in all the decades before: awakening. When we're young, we live to please others. We play the roles of father, mother, husband, wife, dutiful daughter-in-law, kind son-in-law. We spend our lives learning how to do the right thing, but we forget to ask ourselves, am I living true to who I really am? Then, at some point, maybe at 60, maybe 75, you suddenly realize there's not much time left to live someone else's life. It's time to live truthfully. Truthfully with what you love. Truthfully with the dreams tucked away in the drawers of memory. Truthfully with the emotions you've kept buried for years. I once met a woman named Eleanor, 78 years old, living alone in a small apartment by the lake. She had spent her whole life caring for her husband and children, never once traveling far. After her husband passed away, her children told her, "Just rest, Mom, don't go anywhere." But Eleanor quietly learned how to book flights, picked up some basic language skills, and at 79, she went on her very first solo trip. When I asked if she was afraid, she smiled and said, "There's only one thing I fear, that I'll die before I ever truly live." You see, aging is not the end. It's the moment life hands you a ticket to freedom. Freedom from expectations, from comparisons, from judgment, if you're brave enough to accept it. If there's one thing I wish I had understood sooner, it's this. Aging doesn't make you smaller. It's when you finally have the space to blossom, quietly, deeply, and freely. The passions you once silenced, the longing to paint, the dream to write a book, the desire to grow a little garden, they're still there, just waiting for you to live honestly. If you're still reading and this touches something in you, leave a comment. I'm ready to live true to myself. Let it be a gentle yet powerful vow for the beautiful years still ahead. Because you deserve more than just to exist. You deserve to live, truly live, the way your heart has always longed for. Dear friend, if you've stayed with me until the very end of this video, I believe something inside you is gently stirring, even if just a little. Maybe it's a quiet thought, a long sigh, or a soft whisper from within. It's time to start living differently. Together, we've reflected on 7 truths we wish we had known earlier. But remember this, it's never too late to begin living a life you truly choose. Not one shaped by habit, expectation, or fear, but one guided by your own heart. Growing old isn't fading into the background. It's the warm, steady glow of a light that has burned for decades and now shines with peace, wisdom, and quiet strength. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to turn back the clock. You only need to be honest with yourself and brave enough to live a life that makes you smile each morning when you wake up. If today's message spoke to your heart, please leave a comment below. Share one lesson that touched you, or one small thing you'll do differently after watching. I read every comment, and they are the reason I continue to create meaningful videos like this. And if you believe these words could help someone you love, please share this video. Click like and subscribe to Wise Old People, a place where seasoned hearts find one another, where aging is honored as a gift, not a burden. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video. Because we're not here just to wait, we're here to shine.